good opportunity to have a bit of a chat. You could sit wherever you like, as long as you're facing the audience. I thought that'd be friendly. And we've got one microphone to share here at the panel, and also Avi over there, who's been an absolute champion helping me out this evening. Avi will be able to hand the microphone around the audience if you have a question, but I thought we'd just start with really enabling our panellists to introduce themselves, because they actually know more about themselves than I do, and probably you. So we've got a really great panel of people connecting up all of those things that Kuntal and Councillor Knoll were talking about. And so I just thought I'd hand over. Now, I'm wondering if, Ashish, you could pass the microphone across here to Jacob, or do we start at that end? We can do that. Oh, actually, you shotgun not going first.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
There,
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, Jacob, please let people know who you are and what's going on.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me down here to Adelaide. Now, I don't know the normal customs of how you guys have said it, which I've heard tonight, so I'll just say thank you to the elders that are living and past from our Aboriginal communities. Now, I've been invited down mainly about innovation funding. I've been in this space for over 10 years, working from non-for-profit sectors to the energy markets to multiple now natural sectors. Now, the reason I'm here is purely because we're finding a lot of businesses, small and large, are applying for the R&D funding from the government wrong. They're misconceiving what actually qualifies as R&D, thinking that it has to be building a rocket ship to go to outer space or developing brand new medications. It can be as simple as a company developing a new way to handle their waste products. It can be a company developing new ways to save costs while developing a project, which helps them employ more staff. The R&D incentive was built and created for businesses that are taking on challenging work. That could be at any industry in any position. Now, for anyone that does have questions tonight, feel free to come and ask me. I don't feel like doing a sales pitch to all of you, because I'm sure on a Friday night, none of you want a salesperson speaking to you. It's a weekend we're coming towards. But when it comes towards the R&D, if you have questions that you want to know about your industry, know about your companies you're working with, feel free to ask. Happy to go through it, happy to explain them to you. That is what the R&D panel is about, and that is why I talk to people quite regularly. So that's the easiest introduction of myself. Not too much to go in detail. As my wife says, I'm pretty boring outside of work. So I'll pass it across.
That's not true. I'm disagreeing with your wife all of a sudden, and thank you so much, Jacob, for starting us off. Alice, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thank you for having me, everybody. Nini Mana. I know this space very, very well because I've been involved here in Adelaide with the Conservation Council for a long time, but recently moved on to a new path, a new way of being able to look at how I can tackle the climate crisis and ways in which we might be able to shift some economic levers that I haven't been able to so far in my journey and career to date. So myself and my co-founder commenced a startup business, an innovation tech startup called Val AI, or Valuation AI, some 18 months ago. Val AI is based here at the University of Adelaide at ThinkLab, and we've worked and partnered with the University of SA, University of Adelaide and the Australian Institute of Machine Learning over that time to derive a novel product. So this is an automated sustainability rating tool for residential properties. It provides for homes the sustainability rating, the energy efficiency rating, the risk rating, and the climate impact, including the carbon footprint of the household. And we're seeing it as an opportunity to be able to work with large financial corporations and the insurance sector to do a couple of things. One is to meet their task force for climate-related financial disclosures, where they do need to report their Scope 3 on all of their assets, including residential assets that might sit on their loan portfolios or on their risk profiles. But also to use it as an opportunity to engage household and consumers here in Australia for them to be upskilled on what sustainability and resilience of a home means for them. And also to use it as a way to be able to challenge the finance sector and the energy sector to be able to motivate householders to decrease their energy usage, look to free up cash flow and ultimately ensure that the well-being of Australian consumers can be increased because of us being more climate focused and working together towards a more sustainable future. So it's a big ambitious goal that we have. We're a very small startup. We know that from our background, so I'm from a sustainability and STEM background. My co-founder's from a property valuation background. We are not tech heads. We haven't done the degrees we need to be able to code ourselves or to do the ML models. But we know that through collaboration, a lot more can be achieved, and the ability to be able to achieve at scale can only happen if we all work together. So we've really looked to tackle this space, saying that while we might usually exist in a little pond ourselves to the left, looking at climate action, we know that the only way that we're going to be able to create the change that we know society needs is if we can bring government, industry and large financial corporations along for the journey. And so we're looking to be able to act as that conduit to bring everyone together to look at a solution that benefits people, planet, but also profit. So for your bingo tonight, we're working on sustainable cities and communities and also climate action.
Fantastic. I love that you are calling out the bingo numbers. It's brilliant. Look, it's great to just go down the line. So, Associate Professor Ashish Malik, would you like to tell us a bit about you and what you're up to?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I begin by paying my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I work at the University of Newcastle in the Newcastle Business School, and I'm the head of the management discipline. So as an academic, I've got 3 jobs to do. We teach all of what is being talked about here, but we also do research in exactly these areas, and then we engage with industry to make it relevant for and design solutions. So more specifically to your point, whatever I've been up to and what brings me here and what my interest is. So I started my career with my training in managing people, and that's been my field of research. And then I evolved into leadership, management, change, and then I started looking at innovation and change. Then I started looking at how work is organized in knowledge-intensive industries, and then the whole issue of the way work is organized, is it really sustainable, used to catch my attention all the time, not only from an economic perspective, but also from a social perspective, from an ethical perspective, and from a sustainability general perspective. So that got me into collaborating with colleagues in other disciplines, and I do work quite a lot of work outside of the business school. I work with the engineering faculty. I've also got collaborators in the health and medicine space. So my most recent work on sustainability theme and innovation is focusing on the circular economy. And not only that, we did a study on a range of how can we have sustainable business models in this space to really make it work. And to your point, Ali, I think I've also started doing some work in the field of artificial intelligence and how it impacts your business models and how important it is. And here's another plug for those of you playing the bingo. So artificial intelligence is going to have an impact on a number of sustainability development goals. And a very common one is gender equity and quality of work or decent work. So it's going to affect a number of areas. And my interests there comes naturally coming from people management, or HR as they call it, in our field. So apart from that, I gave the earlier example of I work with engineering colleagues. So we have, up at the University of Newcastle, a global advanced innovation center for nanomaterials. So it's called GCAN, and there's a lot of work that is happening on, I think there was an earlier discussion on carbon neutrality or zero carbon zero. So there's a lot of work that is happening on creating advanced nanomaterials that can capture carbon from the environment. And it's such a powerful and amazing field. How can we generate clean energy? How can we generate, energy that can be stored, and transported quite easily? And now the next big thing that's happening at the uni is, using hydrogen and then transporting hydrogen and so on and so forth as another form of clean energy. So some really exciting research is happening. And again, one would ask, what am I doing in here with a business degree and a business background with scientists there? So my role is there to look at whether or not these people are able to commercialize whatever advanced nanomaterials they're making. Because typically, you have a science project, nearly only 5 or 6% of most science projects end up in a successful commercial project. So my role is to look at how we can successfully commercialize some of these big ticket items that have got such a significant role to play in clean energy, carbon capture, and energy storage. So very exciting times. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ashish. That's a very, very broad selection of things. So I tell you what, if there aren't questions about to burst from you, I don't know what's going on. And we've still got Fiona down the end. Fiona Hancock, could you tell us a bit about yourself? What are you up to? Where are you from? That sort of thing.
Thank you. So I'll begin by also adding my respects to elders past and present. I am from Adelaide. I've always lived in Adelaide. It's a bit tragic, but I worked for Ernst & Young, or EY. Hopefully some of you in the room are familiar with it, with EY. They are an accounting firm principally, but we actually have people who are not accountants there. So I've got an engineering background, and we actually have a quite significantly sized climate change and sustainability team. We've got 8 in Adelaide and around 250 across Australia and New Zealand. And that number's growing really quickly, which reflects the prominence of this area with clients. So EY are certainly trying to do things themselves, and there's certain sustainability goals that, they're making initiatives to progress, things like gender diversity. It's already been said, I know. But another one that they're really putting the weight behind is climate action and clean energy, affordable and abundant clean energy. I think it is something like that. And that is both within our own operations. So we have ourselves, committed and achieved, carbon negativity. We're carbon negative now. And we are aiming for net zero by 2025. So that's, less reliance on offsets and more absolute reduction. And that's a global target. But where we really see the impact we have is what the work we do with clients. So the firm's invested a lot in this area more broadly. We have, formed what we've called the Net Zero Centre, which I'm very fortunate to be part of. It's quite a small team, but what it really does is it sits across all of the firm, across all our service lines, to try and bring together the best of what EY has to help clients navigate the challenges of decarbonisation, and really big clients who are very heavy emitters across Australia. So I guess our role, and particularly my team, so I did say I'm in the climate change and sustainability team as well as this Net Zero Centre. I lead the climate change team across Oceania, and we have so many really purpose-driven, ambitious people who are really there to challenge our clients. So we will assist clients with assurance over greenhouse emissions, with decarbonisation strategies, looking at climate risk and opportunity assessments, those sorts of things. It's a very, very broad spectrum, and that's just the climate change team before I get into the sustainability stuff. But our team really do challenge the clients, and I think that's where we do have the most impact. So if we're helping clients with a sustainability strategy, we'll be pushing them, and we'll be doing so with, good justification and the business case to do so. But that is how we are really driving impact, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you, Fiona. And I'd like just to give a round of applause, actually, to our panel. Thank you. And look, so I've got another question to ask you a bit later, but I'd really love to open it up to the audience. And Avi's got a microphone and is looking for anyone for a question. Now, what I'd ask you to do is to direct your question to Jacob, Alice, Ashish, or Fiona, if you have a particular question, or if it's just general, just to the panel. But I'd love some courageous, good-looking, charismatic, you don't have to be a Gemini, you could be any star sign, I don't mind, but does anyone want to ask a question of our wonderful panel? Craig can even ask questions, it's unbelievable. Craig.
Thank you. really Sure. Really wonderful to hear all your different stories, and there seems to be a real theme around innovation and bringing new ideas on quickly, and very conscious that in terms of climate, we've got just this narrow window of opportunity to make a difference. We're talking about 5 to 7 years to really, really transform things. Really keen to get your thoughts around what needs to happen in terms to pick up the scale and pace of what is happening. Because you've all talked about the good things that are happening, but it's not going to be enough. Like, we need more. So how can we increase the ambition across government, business and community to make sure we actually meet the challenge of our time?
Fantastic question. And that was very lucky they didn't break. Thank you so much for that question, Craig. And I'm quite happy for a number of you to jump on this, because we need everybody to work together, right? So, Fiona, do you want to start us off?
I'm happy to kick off, and I think, and I'll probably talk at very highest, very general level. I think policy certainty, which is something that's been sorely missing in Australia in the past decade or so, will go a long way. And I think hopefully I'm optimistic that we're starting to get somewhere on that. And finance, to me, that is the other, the one that is really going to move the masses. And I think we're starting to see that now in terms of how we actually facilitate that. Disclosure certainly helps, and standardising reporting frameworks. And again, that's what gives me so much optimism, is we've seen so much movement on those things in the past couple of years.
Okay, I'll also add a little bit there, wearing my management education hat. We did a paper a couple of years ago, and we called it the quadruple helix. And what that did was basically, for any major change management initiative, whether it's at an organizational level or a national level or a global level, you're going to look at 3 key stakeholders. That's academia, industry, and government. And then, to your point, you've got to make somehow make them work together. And that is the biggest problem. So most of the times you have academics speak a funny language. Industry doesn't understand what we say, or government doesn't understand what industry wants, and so on and so forth. So we came up with so we built on the triple helix, these traditional 3 stakeholders, to the quadruple helix, which is about creating a community of practice of facilitators, someone like yourself, Matthew, and others who are engaging with the community and creating a network where people have established a sense of trust to come together and work together to solve these issues. And we applied this in many industry contexts of change. And I think the same principles can be extended there for climate change. Yeah.
I'm just going to keep it real and say I 100% agree with you. But having tried to work with industry, government and large universities, they're very risk-averse beasts. They take a long time to do things, and their internal policy and process is really, really slow. Sure, it meets their needs, but it isn't quick enough for the action that we require. And I think the one pivotal point that I think South Australia has got on board with, and we could do more of in this country, is looking at the startups and the innovators to be able to be that additional wheel in the process, because we're nimble, we're flexible, we're quite new in terms of not having arduous policy that's blocking any change, and also we are not we're not risk averse, which means we can fail. In fact, we're actually motivated, and quite often through incubators and other things, you're challenged that you need to continue failing because that's the only way we're going to succeed. And I think the more that large corporates are prepared to back multiple startups to give things a go, the more likely we are to be able to find the successes that we want. And then with that kind of runs on the board, have the ability to be able to lobby government to back those things more formally in policy. But that does come with a need, and that's a need to have more people continuing to create new startups and give things a go, to have the ecosystems and the support functions there through universities and others to allow people that don't have a university degree to try and solve the world's problems. But it also requires the funds And quite often with all the startups I've worked with here and globally, you may have left a career to be able to take a punt on a solution, or you may be someone who's starting out as a graduate from university and you don't have the own personal net wealth behind you to be able to do what you'd like to. So the philanthropy model from the US is very important, and we haven't adopted that enough in our country yet, in that we can invest in other new ideas, even if we are sprinkling and diversifying our funds and our investments, because there may be one unicorn in 100 that will be the right offering. And the more that the masses can continue to back small ideas, the more likely we are to be able to succeed.
I'd actually like to agree with that policy completely on dealing with startups. The issue we've been finding recently for the startup market across Australia is most of them don't understand the work they handle is quite innovative. They know they're doing something new, they know they're doing new work, but they don't know how to access the funding. Now, from any of you in the room here who's ever tried to get funding for projects that have had to start a campaign or even had to cancel a campaign or project they've worked on from fear of lost money, the reality is that is the essential part of business. When it comes to the research and development funding, it's there to reward you for the effort you've put in already. Now, at the current time, with the ATO's just adjustment to the investment ratio, it actually works out to be 43.5% of every cent you've allocated towards R&D. Now, that's not just your consumable costs. We're talking about here your contractors, your employees' wages, your utility bills. It's been put in place so when you are actually trying new projects, trying new developments, you can receive large sums of money. I'll give an example of one of my current clients that we're working with. Now, I can't go into too much detail as they are still working on their final prototype. They're a company that deals with turbines and wind turbines across Australia. Now, they've been working on these for the last 3 years and didn't know they could access the R&D funding because they thought they had to be in a medical field to actually qualify for it. Now, under their work alone, we were able to find over $450,000 worth of allocated R&D funding. For them, we got back over $230,000 and helped them hire 2 extra staff members. That is what the funding is for. It's been put in place. It's been going now since 1987. So we've had it for multiple years, but the beautiful thing we're seeing now from the Australian government is they're starting to add more industries. Things that weren't around 5 years ago are a part of the application periods already. The applications have gone down from taking 12 months they can be qualified down to 4 to 5 weeks to be paid by the government. This money can come as a cash injection to your business when you are trying new projects and dealing with losses. When your company's quite got more successful, it can be taking away your corporate tax, which is why we need more companies that are willing to actually do more projects to realize that they can obtain funding. Know that they shouldn't just stop a project. They can just start something new. If they do fail a project, that is great. That is research and development. Try and create a new microwave. Fail with a microwave, claim it back, develop a new project. More and more inventions and more development we have, the quicker we'll get to a better sustainable future. But that's all I really got to say on that.
I love that you're organising funding for failure. I mean, I wish I'd met you like decades ago. I'd be so wealthy. It's unbelievable. Look, I just think this is a wonderful harmonious. This is like a quartet harmonising together. And we've got a question over here. Mark, would you like to ask a question of one or more of our panellists? We need to turn that on.
Mark Parnell, I was 15 years a member of the South Australian State Parliament for the Greens. A lot of people have been talking tonight about how we make people do good things, you know, whether they're small startups or big companies or whatever. The flip side of that is how we stop people doing bad things. Now, I noticed that the recent Nobel Prize for the Environment, or I think that's what they call it, the Goldman Prize, one of them went to a Friends of the Earth spin-off, a group called Market Forces. And basically they're one of those NGOs that tries to get ordinary folk like us to pay more attention to where our money is. You know, where's our super being invested? I know, for example, when I was in Parliament, we found out that our superannuation was being invested in tobacco. And here you've got people in the health department whose job it is to stop people smoking, and their retirement money is invested in tobacco. So I guess my question, I don't mind who answers it, but what role, if any, is there for citizen action, for communities to hold big corporations to account and tell them, you know, by withdrawing our money, for example, that we're not happy with them investing in new coal mines, for example?
Great question, Mark. There is an enormous opportunity for everyday citizen with the emergence of the importance of data and your own personal data, and the amount of power that can wield and influence towards your own future is enormous. So here in Australia, open banking, for example, is something new that's emerging. It's been around in Europe and other places for quite some time, but what that allows you to do is it allows third parties to be able to access your personal bank details with your permissions in place and all the securitisation frameworks that are required and T's and C's ticked, to help you shop around for better deals, or to utilise your personal transaction data to help you reach your personal goals. So that might mean a carbon tracker that tracks where you walk through Google Maps on your phone. That might mean they can compare every energy consumption, water, natural gas bill that you have to find a better retailer that's in your area. It is something as a wave that's coming to Australia, and it will be here this year. There is the factor of the shock of the fact that the banks and everybody else has that data. What's most important is you will now have the ability to be able to utilise that data for good, because ultimately it's open source data that belongs to you, and you can utilise that in an innovative way to make sure that we are no longer beholden to the financial services group that we've been stuck with as a bank since we were Dolomite kids. And it allows, the industry to also be disrupted in a way that means that you as a consumer can take your wares and go elsewhere super fast, because through open banking transactional data, it's your data. You can port that to a new bank, get a better deal and switch over automatically. So that is going to have an enormous amount of power for good, I believe, as long as those messages are communicated to the everyday consumer that it's your data and you can use it to find what aligns with your values.
I feel empowered. Fiona, what can you add?
I'll just take it slightly different. I love the question and I love your sort of perspective of that with data. That's not my area. But what I have seen is just the influence that some of the activist investors have had in the past few years has been incredible. And the support that some of those resolutions that they're raising is starting to get from the larger institutional investors, and that's having a huge impact. Some of them are actually even passing. So the number of resolutions that have been raised has gone up exponentially, but the support that they're getting has also really risen. So it's not just these small activist investors. And I think, that comes from the masses, the individuals who are starting to put pressure on the superannuation funds. They're starting to sort of indicate, where they want their money, or, for other investors, and those superannuation funds are now backing these resolutions, then they're putting pressure on the corporates who are the ones who are emitting. So I think we've started to see it have action, but there's a long way to go.
Just on that, I'll just very briefly add that there's a new movement on AI for good, AI for how can we leverage democratization of your own data. So that movement is picking up. And it's variable from one country to another, the extent to which the uptake or the awareness of that is. But I think public awareness and such events or just a general, we are so technologically connected now. I think it's much easier now to create awareness than it was, say, 10, 20 years ago. Yeah.
All right. This is exciting. I'm learning heaps. It's brilliant. And we have a gentleman over here who might have a question. Kuntal.
Okay, hello. So one question for Jacob and a few others. So firstly to Jacob. So yes, it is a great idea that we'll be getting lots of money through tax rebate and all that. But the question is that for a small and medium company, how easy to do the application process and the technical knowledge? Because hiring a company like you, Brookwood, must be very costly and all that. So is it a small and medium sized company who are, especially in the startup area, they don't have much money? Okay. So do you think they can hire a firm like yours and get the benefit of that? And also the same chance that to Ali, that on sustainable finance, how easy the sustainable finance, is it still a big aspirational thing, or really sustainable finance is growing? And for Fiona and Professor Assis, that sustainable development talk, it's a big thing, but how do you think we can bring it to small and medium? The big companies, they can afford it. So that's, so one way.
So good question. The main thing you do want to look for when you are looking for a firm, if you don't have the knowledge of the claim, is to make sure that they're a firm that works purely off a success base. If you're hiring a firm that wants an upfront cost, or they'll tell you, oh, we're going to charge you this amount and we'll put this much time towards your project, it just won't work out to your best interests. A lot of the times for small and new companies, you won't know what your work is as R&D. Now, that's not saying you don't know what you're doing. If the reality is, we find in a normal and small to medium firms, normally you can pick and allocate about 20 to 40% of your R&D activities. Using a firm, it is quite important. That's why the company I work for exists. We find the additional axes you can qualify for your R&D, whether that be your sales staff needs to know how to communicate this product to the market, whether it be the software licensing for certain technology you've had to get, whether it be the constant changes the ATO puts out. As last 3 days, the ATO has actually publicized the new reports on how to claim R&D and how to access the funding on the percentages you can claim, which is quite relative to the old ones we had, but the way you actually calculate it has changed. So to a company like you were saying that is new, that doesn't know what they're doing, my suggestion is, yes, go to a firm, but make sure they work on a success base. Get them to work rather than a percentage cost telling you how much they're going to charge you. Get them to go for a percentage of the claim. Mainly because they know then the more they get for you, the more they'll get for themselves. They'll dedicate more time, more hours, more resources, and they will chase you up. I cannot tell you how many times I've worked with clients that go, oh, I'll get to this next week. I'll look at that in a couple of days. And they just don't get around to it. I call, I'll email them, I'll even turn up to some of them at their shops. Talk to them about the projects they handled. And one of my recent clients just last week in Western Australia, he fought me tooth and nail to process his report. He had absolute belief there's no money for him until last week when he received a check for $175,000. I got a call the next day saying, thank you for my idea. It was a great idea. Next year you should come to me instead. So coming from the area of not wanting to do it, just having the ideas that there are people out there, there are firms, there are organizations that will work with you. Work with a company that has a success rate. Our company, for example, we're on 100% success just because we hire in a different process. Rather than having, I don't know, who here in this room works in the tech space? Anyone work in the technology space here? All right, cool. Do you have a perfect understanding of the finance? No. The reality is, when you're trying to communicate your projects and what you're dealing with to people across, do they always understand how you're talking about it? Or do they struggle a lot? That's the same with the claims. What we do different is we'll make sure a tech will talk to a tech. A finance will talk to a finance. It means you can get more out of your claim because you're having the same communication. If we keep people in separate areas where an accountant will talk to an IT developer or talk to a person making bread, they won't really know the processes. They won't know what you can claim. But when you get someone from the same background talking to the same person, they have more of an understanding. By getting more of an understanding, you can get more out of your processes and get more money out of the claim. And yeah, that's how I'd probably answer that question for you.
I think mine was sustainable finance and the uptake. I guess to paint the picture, sustainable finance is a thing that's been around for a long time. A lot of institutions in insurance, reinsurance, and finance have been looking at it for a very long time. But the reason why they've been able to do so is they're generally talking about it in terms of commercial property. And in that ecosystem, digital twins exist. So when it comes to reporting on an asset, such as a large building, and looking at how you can fund that or reinsure that or enter it into sustainable finance or even green tag it for the green bond market, they have the data they need to be able to report on that asset and be able to do so. But sustainable finance for the everyday consumer is something quite new. There are certainly, through our experience in the Global Open Finance Challenge and working with UBS on their Sustainable Finance Initiative, there are lots of opportunities that are happening globally, particularly in Netherlands and others that are more forward-facing. Here in Australia, some of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 banks have whole teams. I know one very large institution that's had 70 staff working on a sustainable finance product for retail consumers for the past 2 years. it hasn't come out to you to be able to utilise or access, because the feedback we get when we've challenged them as to why this isn't being put out into the market is because they don't need to be the first player. They don't need to disrupt their brand awareness, and they're unsure of the risk to those people that might be risk averse to or uninterested in engaging in green policy or sustainability at all. But they are all playing in the space, and they're all waiting for the early adopter to be able to launch. What that does mean, though, is it's a disservice for the retail consumer right now. There are other ways in which products are being brought to the market. So there are home loan opportunities where if you can show the sustainability rating or the energy efficiency rating of your home, then you can get a cheaper home loan. There are lower interest rates, etc. There's also personal loans that I, even just in the last 6 months with the change of government, have been really excited to see that they're actually thinking about. So that is bundling options. Just like you can buy anything online with a credit card, we should be able to, as consumers, if we want an EV vehicle, be able to bundle that with a charging port and the solar for our roof in one personal loan. So these are things that are coming. But the feedback that we've been seeking, which is why, if you've been talking about these, why aren't they on the market for consumers now? The feedback we get is there isn't the consumer demand for these products yet. And when there's a tipping point of interest, then we'll be looking to be able to enter those out onto the open market. So a lot of banks, financial institutions and insurance agencies, they do have better deals for you already. They just don't sit front and centre on the homepage of their website. The products are there. You just have to go and actually find them. And for everyday consumers, it's not something, because we're all time poor, that we spend our time on. But the opportunity is to go to your current financier and talk to them about what their sustainable finance options are. They may not be packaging them as green because they're also risk averse and they don't want to be seen to be greenwashing, particularly if they're investing finances elsewhere. But they may have opportunities where for them, they're looking at their risk profile. They have to de-risk assets that are sitting on their loan portfolio in order for them to meet the standards that their shareholders require. And so for some of them, they're even looking at just simply gifting you the solar, for example, in order for you to be able to still be low enough risk for them to maintain you as a customer. And we spoke with Munich Re last year looking at their forecasts for the next 10 years for insurance globally. And there's whole pockets of Australia where, from a risk perspective, they feel that either one, they will choose not to allow insurance agencies to insure because of where they're located climatically, or that they feel that the premiums are going to be so high that the everyday consumer is not going to be able to have the home loan, the home affordability to be able to remain a customer. So what motivates them is consumers wanting to remain a customer and new customer acquisition. So again, a good opportunity for us as individuals to collaboratively go and look and research who we're already dating or in bed with in terms of our financial services, and go and see whether they can give you a better deal, because they can. And ultimately, the better and more energy efficient your lifestyle is, the more they want you as a customer and the more money it will make them. And I know that sounds quite crass, but that is the economics that we live in here in Australia, in the first world. That is the way things are working. But by motivating the large corporates, by the drivers that they have, I think we will get further with our SDG goals.